On a bitterly cold winter morning in January 1943, the world was shaken by a chilling announcement. General Friedrich Paulus, now a Field Marshal, had surrendered the once mighty German Sixth Army. This surrender marked the dramatic climax of the Battle of Stalingrad, a siege that had transformed the city into a nightmarish battleground of relentless combat and unparalleled brutality. What had begun as a bold German offensive to capture a crucial Soviet stronghold had devolved into a catastrophic struggle. The freezing temperatures, grueling urban warfare, and the audacious Soviet counteroffensive had pushed the German forces to the brink of collapse. In this gripping exploration, we will delve into every harrowing detail of how Stalingrad's devastated streets became a deadly trap, the desperate Soviet maneuvers that encircled and crushed the German Sixth Army, and the profound consequences that reshaped the course of World War II. Prepare to uncover the raw, unfiltered reality of a battle that not only marked a turning point in the war, but also exposed the brutal essence of conflict itself. Chapter number 1: Prelude to the Battle. Strategic Context. In this chapter, we delve into the prelude to the Battle of Stalingrad, setting the stage for one of the most significant and brutal confrontations of World War II. Stalingrad, now known as Volgograd, was not just any city. It was a crucial industrial hub and a pivotal transport center situated on the western bank of the Volga River in southern Russia. Its strategic importance lay in its control over key transportation routes, essential for moving resources and troops across the vast Soviet landscape. The city's factories were vital for the Soviet war effort, producing tanks, artillery, and other military equipment. Moreover, Stalingrad was a symbolic target for both Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. For Hitler, capturing Stalingrad was about more than just a tactical victory. It was about dealing a psychological blow to the Soviet Union, as the city bore the name of his arch-rival. The fall of Stalingrad would signal the failure of the Soviet regime to defend its territory and ideology. For Stalin, defending the city was a matter of national pride and a demonstration of Soviet resilience and determination. The seeds of the Battle of Stalingrad were sown with Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22, 1941, the German code name for the invasion of the Soviet Union. This marked the beginning of a massive and rapid advance by German forces, capturing vast territories and achieving significant victories early on. The primary objectives of Operation Barbarossa were to destroy the Soviet military, seize vital economic resources such as oil, coal, and grain, and establish German hegemony over the Soviet Union. The Germans' initial successes led to overconfidence among the high command as they pushed deep into Soviet territory, encircling large Soviet armies and inflicting severe losses. However, as the brutal Russian winter set in and Soviet resistance stiffened, the logistical challenges of sustaining such a rapid advance became apparent, slowing the German momentum and exposing the vulnerabilities of their extended supply lines. By July 1942, Hitler's strategic focus had sharpened, culminating in the issuance of Directive 41, which prioritized the capture of Stalingrad. Hitler saw the city as a critical industrial and symbolic target, believing that its capture would severely damage Soviet morale and secure German dominance on the Eastern Front. This decision was driven by the desire to control the region's industrial production, disrupt Soviet supply lines, and establish a strategic foothold along the Volga River. Capturing Stalingrad was also seen as a prelude to advancing into the oil-rich Caucasus region. The Germans planned Operation Blue, a summer offensive aimed at capturing Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields, involving the German Sixth Army under General Friedrich Paulus and the 4th Panzer Army. As the Germans prepared for their offensive, the stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of human endurance and military strategy, with both sides bracing for a battle that would become one of the bloodiest and most decisive of the war. Next, we will explore the beginning of the offensive in August 1942, examining Operation Blue and the initial German advancements towards Stalingrad, as well as the fierce Soviet resistance that marked the early stages of this epic struggle. In the offensive begins August 1942. Chapter number 2. The offensive begins August 1942. In this chapter, we turn our attention to August 1942, a pivotal moment in the Battle of Stalingrad as the German offensive known as Operation Blue began to unfold. This operation was a crucial part of the German summer offensive, meticulously planned to capture Stalingrad and the oil fields of the Caucasus. The German High Command, led by Adolf Hitler, aimed to strike a decisive blow to the Soviet Union by seizing control of these strategic locations. The operation was spearheaded by the German Sixth Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, who was tasked with leading the advance towards Stalingrad. The Germans, bolstered by the 4th Panzer Army, were determined to encircle and isolate the city, thereby cutting off Soviet forces from reinforcements and supplies. The German strategy was designed to be swift and overwhelming, with the goal of capturing Stalingrad before the onset of the harsh Russian winter. The German advance was methodical and aggressive. As the 6th Army moved towards Stalingrad, they encountered fierce resistance from the Soviet 62nd Army, commanded by General Vasily Zhukov. The Soviets had anticipated the German push and prepared meticulously for urban warfare. Stalingrad's geographical and strategic significance made it a key target for both sides. The city's location on the western bank of the Volga River and its role as an industrial hub meant that its capture would not only provide the Germans with a valuable strategic asset, but also serve as a symbolic victory. The Germans aimed to quickly encircle the city, isolating it from the rest of Soviet-controlled territory and cutting off all possible escape routes for the Soviet defenders. To achieve this, they employed a combination of rapid advances, encirclement tactics, and coordinated attacks with their panzer divisions. The initial phases of Operation Blue saw the German 6th Army advancing with impressive speed, pushing back Soviet defenses and making significant territorial gains. However, as they approached Stalingrad, they encountered the well-prepared Soviet defenses. General Zhukov's forces had transformed Stalingrad into a fortress, employing a strategy that leveraged the city's dense urban environment. The Soviets fortified key positions, prepared defensive strongholds, and planned for a protracted battle that would leverage the city's terrain to their advantage. Zhukov's approach was to turn Stalingrad into a massive defensive stronghold, utilizing every building, street, and factory as a potential defensive position. The Germans faced fierce street-by-street combat as they attempted to breach these fortified positions. Soviet snipers, hidden in the rubble, and defenders armed with small arms and machine guns created a deadly environment for the advancing German troops. Despite their numerical and technological superiority, the Germans found their progress increasingly hampered by the tenacity of the Soviet defenders and the complexities of urban warfare. The encirclement strategy, which was initially designed to trap Soviet forces and cut them off from external support, began to face significant challenges as the Germans struggled to secure their gains and maintain supply lines. The harsh summer conditions and the logistical demands of sustaining a large-scale offensive began to take a toll on the German forces. The advance towards Stalingrad, while initially successful, became a grueling and costly campaign, setting the stage for the prolonged and intense battle that would follow. As we move forward, the narrative will shift to the siege of Stalingrad from September to November 1942, exploring the brutal urban combat and the mounting challenges faced by both the German invaders and the Soviet defenders. This period will highlight the fierce resistance within the city and the evolving dynamics of the conflict as it escalated into one of the most pivotal and devastating battles of World War II. Chapter number 3. The Siege, September-November 1942. In this chapter, we delve into the intense and grueling siege of Stalingrad, spanning from September to November 1942, a period marked by ferocious urban warfare and severe logistical challenges. As the German offensive, known as Operation Blue, continued into the city, Stalingrad was transformed into a brutal battleground of street-by-street combat. The German 6th Army, under General Friedrich Paulus, initially achieved significant gains but soon encountered fierce resistance from Soviet forces. The Soviets, led by General Vasily Zhukov, expertly utilized the city's dense urban landscape to their advantage. Stalingrad's strategic locations, such as Mamayev Kurgan, a crucial hill offering a commanding view of the city, and the factory district, vital for its industrial output, became focal points of relentless and intense fighting. The Germans aimed to capture these critical areas to gain control over the city, but the Soviet defenders turned these locations into heavily fortified strongholds. Soviet snipers, positioned in the rubble-strewn streets and abandoned buildings, created a deadly environment for the advancing German troops. The Soviets employed a strategy of hugging the enemy, keeping German forces close to mitigate the effectiveness of their heavy artillery and air support. House-to-house combat became the norm, with the Soviets using every available building as a defensive position, making the German advance slow, bloody, and costly. The protracted battle began to take a significant toll on the German forces, who faced severe logistical and strategic challenges. As the siege dragged on, the German supply lines, which stretched thin from their bases in the rear, struggled to cope with the increasing demands of the front line. The harsh Russian winter, which set in with its biting cold and heavy snowfall, exacerbated these logistical issues, making transportation and resupply operations difficult and dangerous. The German Sixth Army found itself increasingly isolated, with its supply routes under constant threat from Soviet counterattacks. The initial speed of the German advance had given way to a grueling stalemate, with the Germans unable to secure their gains and facing mounting casualties. The harsh winter conditions further strained the already stretched German resources, leading to shortages of food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The struggle to maintain their foothold in the city became increasingly desperate as the Soviets capitalized on the worsening conditions to strengthen their defenses and launch counteroffensives. Hitler's insistence on holding Stalingrad at all costs added to the German predicament. Despite the mounting difficulties and the increasingly dire situation on the ground, Hitler remained adamant that the city must not fall. His orders, driven by a belief in Stalingrad's symbolic and strategic importance, prevented General Paulus from considering a strategic withdrawal or a tactical retreat, which might have preserved the German Sixth Army's fighting capabilities. The Führer's inflexible stance meant that Paulus and his troops were locked into a protracted siege, with no viable option for escape or resupply. This rigid adherence to orders resulted in a catastrophic situation for the German forces, who faced encirclement, dwindling resources, and a relentless Soviet counteroffensive. The inability to adapt to the evolving conditions and the failure to execute a strategic retreat led to mounting losses and a worsening strategic position for the Germans. As we move forward, the next chapter will focus on the Soviet counteroffensive from November 1942 to February 1943, a critical phase in the battle that marked a turning point. We will explore the Soviet strategic maneuvers that led to the encirclement of the German Sixth Army, the harsh conditions faced by the trapped German troops, and the ultimate shift in the battle's momentum as the Soviet forces began to close in on their beleaguered adversaries. Chapter number 4, Soviet Counteroffensive Operation Uranus. In this chapter, we delve into the pivotal Soviet counteroffensive, Operation Uranus, launched in November 1942, which marked a dramatic turning point in the Battle of Stalingrad. This bold Soviet maneuver, meticulously orchestrated by Marshal Georgy Zhukov and General Alexander Vasilevsky, was designed to encircle and isolate the German Sixth Army, which had been entrenched in Stalingrad for months. The Soviets crafted a sophisticated strategy involving a two-pronged assault aimed at exploiting the weakest points in the German defensive lines, particularly the flanks held by the Romanian Third Army and the Hungarian Second Army, which were considerably less fortified compared to the German core positions. On November 19, 1942, the Soviet forces, comprising the 65th Army and the 21st Army, launched simultaneous attacks from the north and south. The northern assault, led by General Mikhail Shumailov, and the southern push, commanded by General Dmitry Lysitsyn, were executed with precision and speed, utilizing extensive artillery bombardments and deep penetration tactics to disrupt and overwhelm the Romanian and Hungarian units. The Soviet offensive exploited the gaps between the Allied forces, rapidly advancing and cutting off the Romanian and Hungarian armies from their German counterparts. This well-coordinated assault, marked by surprise and superior maneuvering, led to the swift collapse of the Romanian defenses and significant losses among the Hungarian troops. By November 23, 1942, the Soviet forces had successfully completed the encirclement of the German Sixth Army, trapping approximately 250,000 troops within a shrinking pocket. The encircled area, known as the Kessel or Cauldron, isolated the German Sixth Army from any external support, severing their supply lines and communication routes. The trapped forces, including a mix of German, Romanian, and Hungarian soldiers, faced severe shortages of food, ammunition, and medical supplies, compounded by the harsh winter conditions that set in. The encirclement was a significant strategic triumph for the Soviets, drastically shifting the balance of power in the region and placing immense pressure on the German forces. Inside the encircled pocket, the German Sixth Army, commanded by General Friedrich Paulus, found itself in a dire situation as the Soviet forces conducted relentless attacks to tighten their grip. Despite Hitler's steadfast orders to hold Stalingrad at all costs, which prevented Paulus from considering a strategic withdrawal, the conditions within the encirclement grew increasingly untenable. The German troops, suffering from severe shortages and brutal weather, struggled to maintain their defensive positions. The Soviets, equipped with fresh troops and resources, continued their systematic assaults, exacerbating the German forces' difficulties. The prolonged exposure to combat and harsh conditions led to mounting casualties and a rapid deterioration in morale among the encircled troops. As we transition to the next chapter, we will examine the desperate German attempts to break free from the encirclement and the Soviet efforts to consolidate their hard-won advantage. This period will highlight the intense combat operations, the suffering endured by the trapped troops, and the eventual surrender of the German Sixth Army in early 1943. We will also explore how Operation Uranus not only reshaped the Battle of Stalingrad, but also marked a critical turning point in the broader context of World War II, influencing subsequent military strategies and the overall trajectory of the conflict. Chapter number 5, the German response December 1942 to January 1943. In this chapter, we focus on the critical and tumultuous period from December 1942 to January 1943, highlighting the German response to the Soviet encirclement of the Sixth Army and the deteriorating situation within the trapped forces. After the successful encirclement of the German Sixth Army by Soviet forces in late November 1942 through Operation Uranus, the Germans faced a dire situation with approximately 250,000 troops trapped within the shrinking pocket around Stalingrad. In a desperate bid to rescue their encircled forces, the German High Command launched Operation Winter Storm on December 12, 1942. This operation, led by General Erich von Manstein, aimed to break through the Soviet encirclement from the southwest. The plan involved the German 4th Panzer Army, along with elements of the 6th Army, advancing rapidly to create a corridor to relieve the besieged forces. Initial stages of Operation Winter Storm saw some success as German units pushed through Soviet defensive lines, making significant territorial gains and providing a glimmer of hope for the trapped soldiers. The advance was marked by fierce combat as German forces attempted to exploit weaknesses in the Soviet encirclement. However, Operation Winter Storm encountered formidable challenges that ultimately led to its failure. The harsh winter conditions, with temperatures plunging to as low as -30°C, severely impacted German operations. Frostbite, mechanical failures, and fuel shortages hampered the mobility of troops and vehicles. The snow-covered terrain and icy roads further complicated logistical efforts, making it difficult for the German forces to maintain their momentum. The Soviet Union, having anticipated the German relief attempt, had reinforced their defensive positions and prepared countermeasures. Soviet troops, including the 1st and 4th Armies, mounted effective defensive and counterattacking operations, slowing the German advance and preventing the establishment of a secure corridor to the encircled 6th Army. The combination of relentless Soviet resistance and adverse weather conditions led to the gradual stalling of the German offensive. By December 23, 1942, Operation Winter Storm had effectively stalled, with the German forces unable to sustain their advance or secure a breakthrough to relieve the encircled troops. The failure of the operation highlighted the increasing improbability of a successful rescue and underscored the dire circumstances faced by the Sixth Army. Within the encircled area, conditions rapidly deteriorated as the Soviets maintained a tight blockade, cutting off all supply routes and exacerbating the plight of the trapped soldiers. The Germans faced severe shortages of food, ammunition, and medical supplies. The bitter cold, combined with inadequate shelter and medical care, led to widespread suffering and high casualties among the encircled troops. Soviet forces continued their relentless attacks, tightening their grip on the pocket and making any attempt at relief increasingly difficult. As we transition to the next chapter, we will explore the final stages of the Stalingrad battle, focusing on the ultimate surrender of the German Sixth Army and the aftermath of the battle. This period will examine the final desperate attempts by the Germans to break free from the encirclement, the further deterioration of conditions within the pocket, and the profound impact of the Soviet victory on the broader context of World War II. We will delve into the strategic consequences of the battle and how it marked a significant turning point in the conflict, shifting the momentum of the war in favor of the Allies. Chapter number 6, the surrender January 1943. In this chapter, we delve into the crucial final stages of the Battle of Stalingrad, focusing on the Soviet offensive in January 1943 and the surrender of the German Sixth Army. By late January 1943, the Soviet Union executed a decisive and overwhelming assault to eradicate the remaining German resistance. The Soviets, having regrouped and reinforced their positions, launched their final push with precision and aggression. The offensive involved a concerted effort by several Soviet fronts, including the 1st and 4th Soviet armies, as well as the 2nd Guards Army. The offensive's orchestration saw a relentless series of attacks aimed at closing off every escape route for the Germans. Soviet forces, now bolstered by superior numbers and a strategic advantage, mounted coordinated assaults from multiple directions. Their advance was marked by a combination of massive artillery bombardments, targeted airstrikes, and relentless infantry engagements. The Soviets employed a strategy of encirclement and attrition, tightening their grip on the encircled Germans and exploiting every weakness in their defenses. Soviet snipers and infantry, taking advantage of the city's urban terrain, launched frequent and ferocious assaults on the German positions, creating a cauldron of fierce street fighting. The Soviet High Command, led by General Georgy Zhukov and General Alexander Vasilevsky, carefully planned and executed these operations to ensure maximum impact, ultimately aiming to suffocate the German forces. The German Sixth Army, trapped within a shrinking pocket, faced an increasingly dire situation. The deteriorating conditions inside the encirclement were exacerbated by the brutal winter weather, which plunged temperatures to extreme lows, reaching -30 degrees Celsius, -22 degrees Fahrenheit at times. The Germans suffered from severe shortages of critical supplies, including food, ammunition, and medical resources. The initial hope for a successful relief operation, known as Operation Winter Storm, launched in December 1942 under the command of General Erich von Manstein, quickly waned. Operation Winter Storm aimed to break through the Soviet encirclement and reach the Sixth Army, but it struggled due to the harsh winter conditions, stretched supply lines, and staunch Soviet resistance. German forces involved in the operation encountered strong Soviet defensive positions and logistical challenges, which hindered their ability to deliver the necessary relief and sustain their advance. As the Soviet pressure mounted and the German situation grew increasingly untenable, General Friedrich Paulus, now promoted to Field Marshal by Hitler in a bid to boost morale and avoid surrender, faced the grim reality of the encirclement. The German command structure was severely compromised, and the capacity to mount an effective defense or initiate a breakout diminished with each passing day. On January 31, 1943, in a stark acknowledgement of the hopelessness of their situation, Paulus formally surrendered the encircled German forces. This surrender, which involved the capitulation of approximately 90,000 German troops, marked a catastrophic defeat for the German military and represented a significant turning point in the Eastern Front. The capture of the Sixth Army was a severe blow to German morale and military capability, demonstrating the Soviet Union's resilience and strategic prowess. In the next chapter, we will examine the aftermath of the Battle of Stalingrad, focusing on the immediate and long-term consequences of the German defeat. We will explore how the battle influenced subsequent operations on the Eastern Front, the strategic shifts it prompted, and its broader impact on the overall trajectory of World War II. This analysis will provide insight into the shifting dynamics of the war and the evolving strategies of the Axis and Allied powers. Chapter number 7, Aftermath and Impact. In this chapter, we will deeply analyze the aftermath and enduring impact of the Battle of Stalingrad, dissecting the immense human cost, the strategic ramifications, and the long-term consequences for both the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. The Battle of Stalingrad left an indelible mark on history, not only for its strategic significance but also for its staggering human toll. As the battle came to a close, the scale of casualties was nothing short of catastrophic. Estimates suggest that the total number of casualties, including soldiers and civilians, surpassed 2 million. This figure reflects the combined losses of both the Axis and Soviet forces, with the German Sixth Army suffering approximately 300,000 casualties, including killed, wounded, and captured. The Soviets, while suffering immense losses, also faced devastating civilian casualties. The city's population, subjected to relentless bombardment, starvation, and disease, saw a dramatic reduction. The ferocity of the battle led to the near-total destruction of Stalingrad, with entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble and countless lives lost in the process. The human cost was amplified by the brutal winter conditions and the relentless combat that raged through the city streets, leaving behind a landscape scarred by death and destruction. Strategically, the Soviet victory at Stalingrad represented a monumental turning point in World War II. The battle marked the end of Germany's offensive into the Soviet Union and initiated a pivotal shift in the war's momentum. The Soviet victory disrupted Nazi plans for further territorial expansion in the East, compelling a strategic reevaluation within the German High Command. The failure of Operation Barbarossa to achieve its objectives and the subsequent defeat at Stalingrad forced Germany into a defensive posture. This setback, combined with the vast resources and manpower the Soviets were able to muster, set the stage for a series of Soviet offensives that gradually pushed the Germans back across Eastern Europe. The defeat at Stalingrad also had significant implications for the Axis alliance, weakening German military capabilities and undermining the strategic cohesion of the Axis powers. The battle's outcome reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the Eastern Front, foreshadowing the eventual collapse of Nazi Germany. The impact of Stalingrad on German morale was profound and far-reaching. The battle shattered the myth of German invincibility that had been cultivated through previous successes. The loss not only demoralized the German military but also had repercussions on the home front. The German public, who had been led to believe in a swift and decisive victory, faced a stark and painful reality as news of the defeat spread. The battle exposed the limits of German military prowess and highlighted the tenacity of Soviet resistance. The psychological blow to the German leadership was significant, leading to a re-evaluation of strategic priorities and a shift towards a more defensive posture on the Eastern Front. The defeat at Stalingrad also had a profound impact on Nazi propaganda and the internal politics of the Third Reich, contributing to the growing disillusionment and unrest among both the military and civilian population. In the long term, the victory at Stalingrad had lasting effects on both the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. For the Soviet Union, the battle represented a critical boost in morale and confidence. The Red Army, having endured and triumphed in one of the war's most grueling engagements, gained invaluable experience and momentum. The success at Stalingrad paved the way for further Soviet offensives, including the Kursk offensive and the eventual push towards Berlin. The Soviet Union's ability to recover from the initial German onslaught and achieve a decisive victory underscored its resilience and military capability. Conversely, the German defeat prompted a significant strategic shift. The loss at Stalingrad forced the German high command to adopt a more defensive strategy, focusing on holding the extensive territories already occupied rather than pursuing further aggressive operations. The shift in German strategy reflected a broader reassessment of their war aims and resource allocation, as the harsh realities of the Eastern Front became increasingly apparent. In the next chapter, we will explore how the Battle of Stalingrad influenced subsequent military campaigns, the shifting alliances, and the evolving strategies that emerged in the aftermath of this pivotal conflict. This examination will offer a comprehensive understanding of the battle's legacy and its role in shaping the course of World War II. Conclusion: lessons from Stalingrad. In this concluding chapter, we will synthesize the pivotal lessons derived from the Battle of Stalingrad, focusing on the strategic miscalculations that led to the German defeat and the remarkable resilience and adaptability demonstrated by the Soviet forces. The Battle of Stalingrad offers profound insights into the consequences of strategic miscalculations in warfare. The German decision to encircle Stalingrad, a city of immense symbolic and strategic value, marked a critical turning point in their campaign against the Soviet Union. Fueled by Adolf Hitler's insistence on capturing the city at all costs, the German forces became overextended, both geographically and logistically. The push into the Soviet Union, initially marked by rapid advances, faltered as the harsh winter, stretched supply lines, and mounting Soviet resistance took their toll. The Germans' failure to adapt their strategies to the evolving battlefield conditions compounded their difficulties. The refusal to retreat or alter their approach in the face of mounting challenges exemplifies how rigid adherence to initial plans can lead to catastrophic outcomes. This strategic rigidity, combined with an underestimation of Soviet resolve and capabilities, ultimately led to the encirclement and defeat of the German Sixth Army. The logistical failures stemming from inadequate supplies, harsh weather, and overextended communication lines exemplify the perils of hubris and the dangers of overreach in military strategy. In stark contrast, the Soviet response to the German offensive illustrates a masterclass in resilience and adaptability. The Soviets, faced with seemingly insurmountable odds, leveraged a combination of effective defensive tactics and innovative counteroffensive strategies to turn the tide of the war. The urban warfare tactics employed in Stalingrad, including house-to-house fighting, sniping, and strategic counterattacks, highlighted the Soviet ability to adapt to the unique challenges of the battlefield. Operation Uranus, the counteroffensive that encircled the German Sixth Army, exemplified Soviet strategic ingenuity and operational execution. By targeting the weaker flanks of the German forces and executing a coordinated, multi-pronged attack, the Soviets achieved a significant strategic victory. The resilience of the Soviet forces and their capacity to recover from initial setbacks underscore the importance of adaptability in warfare. The ability to adjust strategies in response to evolving conditions and to maintain morale under extreme pressure proved crucial in the eventual Soviet triumph at Stalingrad. As we conclude our exploration of the Battle of Stalingrad, it is evident that this monumental clash not only shaped the course of World War II, but also offered enduring lessons in military strategy and human resilience. The German overreach and strategic inflexibility serve as a cautionary tale, while the Soviet adaptability and tenacity exemplify the power of effective strategic response in overcoming formidable challenges. The battle's legacy, etched in the annals of history, continues to inform military theory and strategic planning to this day. Thank you for joining me on this in-depth journey through the Battle of Stalingrad. Your engagement and interest have been greatly appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with our future explorations and analyses of pivotal historical events. Until next time, goodbye and see you in our next video documentary.